There's a specific kind of character arc that stays with people long after a story ends. The arc where someone shaped entirely by violence tries to learn how to live without it. Berserk and Vinland Saga don't just show brutality, they show the psychological aftermath. And for a lot of people who grew up navigating chaos, pressure, or emotional instability, these stories feel uncomfortably familiar. Not because most of us lived anything close to what Guts or Thorfinn went through, but because both characters embody something real. What happens when your identity forms around survival instead of choice? Guts is introduced to the world like a weapon someone forged in the wrong place. Thorfinn is a kid who had his future stolen so early he barely remembers having one. Their lives get built around instincts instead of intentions. And that's where these stories quietly become valuable, not just entertaining. They show the cost of a survival mindset that never gets turned off. Guts learns to read a room the way he reads a battlefield. Thorfinn loses the ability to picture any version of himself that isn't defined by revenge. These aren't just narrative tragedies. They're accurate depictions of what happens when trauma becomes the only lens someone has for understanding themselves. The turning point in both stories isn't a victory. It's the moment each character realizes the thing they're good at is the thing that's destroying them. And that's a moment a lot of people relate to. Realizing the strategies that protected you when you were young, shutting down, getting angry, staying busy, or fighting everything. They don't help you build the life you actually want. Thorfinn kneeling in the snow, unable to find meaning in revenge anymore, mirrors the real-world moment when someone looks at the habits they inherited from pain and finally see the cost. Guts gripping the Dragon Slayer with hatred 1 second and regret the next is the feeling of knowing you can't just brute force your way through everything forever. And that's where both stories start to matter on a personal level. They show that healing doesn't begin when the violence stops. It begins when you realize survival and living are not the same thing. And they ask whether you're willing to confront the person you became in order to protect the child you used to be. Both stories shift once the characters finally recognize that the life built on instinct can't carry them any further. And the transition isn't clean or triumphant. It's confusing, embarrassing, and disorienting. Thorfinn wakes up in a world where revenge no longer gives him purpose, and the emptiness that follows feels almost worse than the hatred. He has to relearn everything, how to speak without raging, how to work without burning out, how to make decisions that aren't governed by grief. Vinland Saga captures this beautifully by showing that peace isn't a feeling, it's a skill. It's something you practice, mess up, and rebuild sometimes daily. Guts' shift looks different because his world doesn't allow gentleness in the same way. The trauma he carries isn't something he can just walk away from. It's stitched into him. It's the thing that wakes him up at night. It's the thing that threatens to consume him if he ever sets the sword down for too long. But what Berserk shows with painful clarity is that even in the ugliest circumstances, you can carve out small, stubborn pockets of peace. A campfire, a moment of trust, people who choose to stand with you when you have nothing left to give. Guts doesn't get to abandon the sword the way Thorfinn abandons vengeance, but he learns something equally valuable. Peace can exist in pieces, and sometimes that's enough to keep you human. This is where the stories offer something quietly powerful to the audience. They break the myth that healing is about erasing your past or becoming someone completely new. Thorfinn grows by rejecting the identity violence forced onto him. Guts grows by refusing to let that identity define every choice he makes. One sheds the sword and the other one carries it differently. Both paths are valid, both take courage, and both remind you that you don't have to become the opposite of your pain to outgrow it. You just have to become someone who can hold it without letting it steer you. And what makes both journeys resonate long after the credits roll is how the people around Guts and Thorfinn reshape their futures. Neither of them evolves in isolation. In Vinland Saga, Thorfinn only begins to understand the possibility of a different life because he finally meets people who aren't trapped inside the same logic of violence. Einar challenges him just by existing, by showing what it looks like to build instead of destroy, to grieve without turning into a weapon. Arnheide's story forces Thorfinn to confront the humanity cost of the worldview he once embraced. Leaf gives him a memory of who he used to be, proof he wasn't born for the life he fell into. These bonds don't fix him. They give him something essential, like a reference point, outside the anger that raised him. Guts finds something similar, but far, far more fragile. Berserk never pretends the world is safe enough for a clean transformation. Instead, it shows how connection becomes a lifeline when you can't outrun your demons. The new Band of the Hawk, the mismatched group that forms around Guts, gives him a reason to stay tethered to humanity. Isidra's stubborn admiration, Shirk's empathy, Farnes's growth, Sepko's loyalty, each of them reflects back a version of Guts he doesn't think he deserves, and that friction is the point. Berserk argues that sometimes the people who save you aren't the ones who show you who you could be. They're the ones who refuse to let you become the worst version of yourself. Together, these stories offer two models of healing that aren't neat or idealized. Thorfinn teaches you can grow beyond the person that pain shaped you into. Guts teaches you that if you can't escape what shaped you, you can still build a life around the parts of you worth protecting. Both paths require the same thing: courage to face yourself without the armor of rage, and connection strong enough to remind you why the work matters. And I think that's the real takeaway. You don't break the cycle of violence by erasing your past. You break it by refusing to let the past dictate the future you're allowed to imagine.